Good day everyone. Today we'll be learning how to deploy or send our files directly from our system to our Firebase Firestore database. We'll be using a simple Python script which will be easy to set up without much prior knowledge in programming or coding in general. In fact, if you just want to make use of this script without learning how to write the whole code, you can just watch the setup, then skip to the end of the video where you can watch the summary of the setup. The code will be available on GitHub. So to start, we'll create a folder called JSON to Firebase. This is going to be the folder where we'll keep our code. So open it in VS Code and create a new Python file which will be called JSON to Firebase. This script requires just one Python library, which is the firebase-admin library. So we go to our terminal and run pip install firebase-admin. So once the installation is complete, we go to our browser and create a new Firebase project. This project is going to be called JSON to Firebase. We don't need analytics for this project, so we disable it and create the project. Once the setup is done, on the Firebase dashboard, we click on the Cloud Firestore button, then we create a database using the Create Database button. For this project, I'll be using all the default values. After the database is created, we go to our project settings, and under the service accounts, we click on the Generate Private Key. This downloads the secret key required to access our Firebase application. Since we'll be using Python, I'll copy the code for setup for Python code. Then going to our project, we paste this setup in our JSON to Firebase file. We'll also paste our secret key and rename it to service account key. Let's add the service account key to our Python script. Next, we add the required libraries like Firestore and JSON. After this, we create our Firestore client. This is going to help us manage the database. Then, we move to creating the function which uploads the file to Firestore. It takes in the JSON part and the collection name. Using the open function, we open the JSON part as a read file and load the JSON file into the data object. We create a reference to the collection using db.collection and we set the collection name. And to add the data to this collection, we just use the add method. And input our data. It is good practice to catch errors in our code, so we use the try and except block to catch any error that might arise when we run this code. We create an entry point for this script using if name equal to main and set the JSON file to sample the JSON and the collection to just sample collection. Let's create the sample.json file. We just put some dummy data into the file so we can see some information on the Firebase. After setting some information in our JSON file, we click on the Run button and this allows us to run the file. Once the process is complete, we go to our Firestore console and we can see our file has been added to the sample collection. I'll add some print functions. This notifies us once the upload starts and also notifies us once it's complete. So if we run this again, We can see the notifications on the terminal, and if we go to Firebase, we'll see the document has been added. For the next part of this video, let's modify this function to set a custom document ID for the document which is added to Firebase. We'll use a document ID variable in the function, and under the collection reference, we check if it is available, that's if it is not known. And if it is available, we set the document ID. But if it is not, we use the previous function, which is just collection reference.add. To test this, we comment out the previous function. The first line allows us to upload using an auto-generated document ID. This function would allow us to use a user-generated ID. So we call the function again and set the sample JSON data and the collection name as sample collection. Finally, we set the user ID. If we should run the code now, once we check the file on Firebase, we see it has the user ID as the document ID. The next part of this code we explore is adding a list of documents into the Firestore database. So we copy the previous function and rename it to upload JSON list to Firestore. I'll be using a dummy restaurant data from one of my previous projects. If you want to look at the project, the description will be at the top of the screen. So for this function, we don't need the if statement, so we remove that and replace it with a for loop, which loops through the items in the data, and for each of the items, we add it to the collection. So this function generally adds a list of documents, and each of them are going to be given an auto-generated ID. We call the upload JSON list to Firestore, add the restaurant.json and the name of the collection as list collection. Once we run the application, we can check the Firestore database, and we have the list collection with a list of documents, each having the data. We have the list collection with a list of documents, each having the data from the JSON file. Finally, if we want to create a unique ID for each of the items that gets added to our collection from this list, we will modify the upload list to Firestore. We will set a unique ID variable, which is going to be we add a boolean called unique ID with a default value of false. Then within our for loop, we check if the unique ID is true, and if it is true, we take the ID for each of these items and we set the data. This last function uploads list of documents with a user generated ID. We add the JSON file called restaurant.json and the name of the collection called list collection, and set the unique ID to true. So it seems like I made a mistake in the setting of data. This should be item instead of data. So we replace the data in the set to item. So if we run the project now and go back to our Firestore, we'll see our list of documents, each with the ID on the JSON file. So in summary, if you just skipped to this point of the video, this is the summary of how to use this JSON to Firestore script. If you want to upload a single JSON file into a Firebase collection, you use the first script and replace the sample.json with your JSON file, and this file should be in this working directory, the same working directory as the Python script. So if you have a test.json file, you just change the name to test.json and set your collection name to your collection. I'll just be using text collection. You can run the code and go back to our Firestore database, and inside our database you can see the text collection and our data stored within the collection. Next, if you need to use a unique ID for the document ID from Firebase, you can uncomment this part of the function, set the JSON and the document ID as the last parameter. And once you run the code, you can see on the terminal that it is starting and it has completed. You can go to the Firestore database and see your documents with the ID you created. So if you want to add a list of documents to Firestore, you just take a JSON with list of items and set it as set the path in the function and the name of the collection. Then you run the code, and after a while, once it completes, you see the file upload complete. You can go to Firebase, and in your Firestore database you have the list of items from your JSON file. This last line allows you to use the ID on each of the items of the list as the document ID. Let us change the collection name to unique ID collection, and make sure you set the last parameter to true. So once you run the file, it checks for the ID in each of the items and uses this to set the document ID while uploading the list to Firestore. So on our Firestore database, we can see our unique collection with each of the items in our list. Please note that the ID is taken from the ID parameter on the JSON file. So if you want to use another parameter within the list for the document ID, you can just change it here and it gets updated automatically. So if this video helped you in any way, please support my channel by subscribing and liking the video. And remember, the code for this video is in the description, so you can always go to GitHub and copy the code and use it as you wish. Thank you.